The Israeli-Palestinian peace process enters a critical stage, and the mistrust between the two sides grows as Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas gets set to meet the U.S. President in the White House tomorrow. Citizens in Crimea go to the polls to decide on former annexation by Russia, Ukraine, the EU, and the U.S. all refuse to recognize the vote. The plot thickens in the mystery surrounding flight MH370. More than 25 countries are involved in the vast search as the likelihood it was an act of terror increases.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening. 2 weeks after meeting the Israeli Prime Minister, U.S. President Barack Obama is set to meet Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas at the White House tomorrow and continue the efforts to reach an Israeli-Palestinian framework agreement in the upcoming weeks. I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev explores the stakes of the crucial meeting.
It's a Middle East month for U.S. President Barack Obama. After the Jordanian king and the Israeli prime minister, the White House is set to host Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas on Monday. Obama's increased involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process is designed to give the latest round of talks a final push forward and reach a framework agreement that will enable negotiations to continue. But Jerusalem and Ramallah are still far from agreement.
Abbas is a partner that takes but doesn't give. He is not a partner for a final status agreement in which there is recognition of Israel as a national homeland of the Jewish people.
The 9-month timetable for talks is approaching in less than 2 months. And similar to his meeting with Netanyahu earlier this month, Obama's message for Abbas is that the time has come to take some tough decisions. High on the agenda is Netanyahu's demand for an official Palestinian recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. Abbas, with the Arab countries' support, is expected to reject the Israeli demand again. And remarks by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in Congress last week definitely give him a boost.
I think it's a mistake for some people to be, raising it again and again as the critical decider of their attitude towards the possibility of a state and peace, and we've obviously made that clear.
Kerry's criticism may have been intended to please the Palestinians that have been warning of a pro-Israeli stand, but it has raised the ire of the Israeli right.
It is unfortunate that ahead of the Abbas-Obama meeting, the U.S. is mistaken and once again pressures the wrong side.
The Americans haven't given up hope for a framework agreement by the end of this month, even before the fourth and final stage of Palestinian prisoner release. As Kerry admitted last week, the level of mistrust has never been higher, but the alternatives are grim, so the U.S. is counting on both sides not to spoil the party.
And we stay with the Palestinian. Israel has reopened the border with the Gaza Strip today to allow shipments of fuel a day after the enclave's sole power plant shut down. Israel has closed the commercial Kerem Shalom border crossing on Thursday after Gaza militants fired around 80 rockets at southern Israeli towns. The power plant is Gaza's main source of electricity for the roughly 1.8 million people there. Other sources of power come directly from Israel and Egypt, but over the years, locals say power cuts have become a way of life. The civil war in Syria has entered its 4th year. What started out as peaceful demonstrations has since descended into a deadly chaos, and all the while the Syrian people continue to suffer. I-24 News correspondent Charles Biblazer has more.
3 years have passed since Syrians took to the streets to demand their freedom, but they are seemingly no closer to achieving it. What began as a peaceful uprising has since morphed into a brutal civil war, which has left an estimated 140,000 people dead and millions more displaced.
We started the revolution as a spontaneous act. We started peacefully, but the regime used machinery to kill people in the face of non-violent protests.
The crackdown was indeed fierce. And with the killing came Western calls for Syrian President Bashar Assad to step down.
There's no excuse for inaction. Now is the time for the United Nations Security Council to sanction the Syrian regime and to stand with the Syrian people.
But help would come mainly from the east, and not even for the Syrian people themselves. Iran and Russia have backed Assad's regime with more than mere platitudes, rather with bombs and bullets. And with every fruitless negotiation and crossed red line, more blood is spilled. Syria, if it can still be called a country at all, lies in ruins, torn between rival factions. Assad's forces control the Western Front, while the north is divided between rebel fighters, jihadist groups, and Kurds. On Sunday, Assad consolidated his grip on power.
After a series of military operations, the Syrian army re-established security and stability to Yabrud city and in the northern suburbs of Damascus after killing a huge number of terrorists.
By seizing the strategic city of Yabrud today, the regime has secured the land route linking Damascus, Aleppo, and the Mediterranean coast, while choking off a vital supply route to opponents. Throughout the world, the anniversary of Syria's uprising was marked with vigils in support of the country's besieged people, who 3 years on are still waiting.
And joining me right now is senior Middle East analyst Ali Waked. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. So we're seeing that, of course, the situation in Syria is deteriorating, but it's deteriorating to a certain point, to a separation between tribes. And how can this actually get to a certain, let's say, development? How can it develop? What is the next stage that is going to happen in Syria?
Well, I think, Lucy, we are talking in the first day or the fourth year of this civil war in Syria, and it is very symbolic that in this first day, the regime had managed to take back the very important and strategic city of Yabrud, which means that in this fourth in this fourth year, Assad is succeeding to concretize and to translate his advantage, his military advantage. I think more and more parts of the Syrian population, even those who are against the regime, understand that the regime is the only guarantee for stability and security because of what we've been seeing from the infightings between the rebels, the jihadist groups. So we can say in this beginning of the first year that the situation is going towards Assad, towards keeping him in power. This is almost true. We are now hearing that the regime is preparing the elections of July.
Unlike 2 years ago, we can say, and more than that, with the, let's say, the situation of the Islamic groups who are taking maybe more power, right now, if we will look abroad, maybe the West and the United States will rather to take Assad's side.
They are taking more power in the opposition, not on the ground and not against the regime. We saw in Yabrud, this very strategic city, which is the last bastion of the rebels in the very strategic borders between Syria and Lebanon, the main road that gave supplies of weapons and arms and fighters to the rebels. The city was lost partially because of the infightings between different jihadist groups, and the regime, of course, supported by Hezbollah, had a larger maneuver and succeeded to take place. So we can say that the Syrians, between the bad choice, which is the regime, and the worst, which is the jihadist, are seeking for something that they know already, even if it is bad, and they know the regime. With the jihadists, the infightings, the fact that the jihadist group took control of the whole opposition, apparently Assad is managing both on the ground and among the public opinion, both in Syria and outside Syria.
Who knows? Maybe he can declare victory in the upcoming days or the upcoming months.
He will, although the Syrian opposition will keep some pockets, none of them in strategic zones in Syria, but on the ground we can talk about a beginning of a real serious victory of the regime.
Okay, Middle East analyst Ali Waked, thank you very much for
this.
Lucy. That was surprising. Russia and Ukraine agreed today on a truce until March 21st, in which Russian forces will stop the blockade in Crimea following the referendum in the peninsula. And today, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry called for constitutional reforms in Ukraine. I-24 News reporter Oli Shapira with more.
On the edge of the biggest crisis since the end of the Cold War, the people of Crimea are voting Sunday on a crucial referendum to join Russia or to stay in Ukrainian territory. The results, likely be published Monday morning, are widely expected to be in favor of Russia as Ukrainian officials try to cope with the new reality in the peninsula.
Considering the current threat on Ukrainian borders and the military aggression by the Russian Federation, we must make a decision today about immediately setting up a reserve fund and designating it to finance mobilization.
Meanwhile, on the ground, the situation is still complicated. The Ukrainian Minister of Defense said today that Russia has lifted some of its blockade on Crimea. Nevertheless, Ukrainian officials expressed their concern regarding Moscow's intention to move even further beyond the Crimean Peninsula.
Today we started to speak about referendum, about the territorial integrity of Ukraine within this peninsula, and now they moved further. They moved to the mainland.
It might be too tempting and too dangerous to compare the current situation to that in Anschluss in 1938, the annexation of Austria to Nazi Germany, and the opening shot that helped lead to World War II.
There is a risk of destabilization, of destruction of the modern, peaceful world. The world is on the verge of World War III, and the task of the powerful countries of the G7 is to stop Putin.
Without the recognition of Ukraine and most of the Western world, Russia might find itself more isolated than ever.
It will be part of Ukraine tomorrow. It will be part of Ukraine next week. It will be part of Ukraine unless and until its status is changed in accordance with Ukrainian and international law.
Considering it all, many world leaders are hoping today that history will not repeat itself.
And on the phone with me right now from Crimea is Paula Slyer, Middle East Bureau Chief for Russia Today. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Paula, what was the feeling in Crimea today around the vote?
Well, the polls closed about 10 minutes ago, and the sense we get, just talking to some of the observers, is that as many as 90% of people might have voted in favor of joining Russia. This very much was the expectation. We were hearing figures earlier in the day that as many as 80% would vote in terms of joining Russia. It's been almost a jovial kind of atmosphere. There's been a number of concerts that have been organized throughout the day, the same plan for tomorrow. Already for several days, there have been Russian flags that have been flying from the rooftops of some of the government buildings. People we've been stopping in the streets saying that they believe that this is an historic vote and an historic occasion. So the feeling on the ground is very much wanting to become part of Russia.
So you're saying, people are saying that it's a historic vote. We can say also that it was a surprising step.
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
I'm saying that you're saying that it was a historic moment, that everybody's talking about it, but we can say also that it was a surprising moment as well.
Look, it depends really who you talk to. When you speak to people here, where something like 58% of the population identify as ethnic Russians, they'll tell you that Crimea was always a part of Russia. If you look at history, for something like 2 centuries, this was part of Russia, and it was only given to Ukraine with the collapse, or before the collapse of the Soviet Union. So people here saying that it wasn't a surprise, that they've always had this kind of yearning to go back to Russia, that they have their roots in Russia, their economic ties, their family ties. One of the points to monitor, though, is how the minority population feel. You have around 20% of the population who are Tatars, and by and large, they did not come out and vote today. And there was even a few days ago some statements from the leadership, the more extreme leadership of the Tatars, saying that if Russia joins Crimea with Russia, they will launch some kind of jihad against Russia, and that Russia will be fighting not only in Chechnya, but also here. Russia's been trying to calm those concerns, not just with the Tatars, but other minority groups that are here, and saying that it intends to make this Crimea, whatever status it takes in the future, be a place where people have equal rights and where everybody can feel comfortable and represented.
Okay, Paula Slyer, thank you very much for this. At least 100 villagers were killed in Nigeria's central Kaduna state in attacks linked to dispute between ethnic groups. Heavily armed men entered 3 villages in the district in the south of the state. Residents blame members of the mainly Muslim Fulani tribe, although it was not clear who was behind the attack. Thousands of people have been killed in recent years in violence blamed on a religious dispute between Fulani Muslims and Christian farmers. A soldier and a civilian were killed in fighting between Sunni Muslim and Alawites in the northern Lebanese city of Tripoli, bringing the death toll from 4 days of clashes to 12. The civilian was killed by sniper fire, and the soldier was killed when militants fired rocket propelled grenades at 2 personal carriers that had been dispatched to quell the violence on Saturday night. And joining me tonight for a festive look inside Israel's I-24 News correspondent Eli Ochamber. Good evening, Eli.
Good evening, Lucy.
So today is, if you don't know, is the Purim holiday. The entire country got dressed up today, celebrating the most colorful holiday in the Jewish tradition. This is, of course, the triumph celebration according to the Book of Esther. Before we dig deeper in this holiday, let's see a report.
Where should a red line be drawn?
The tense Iran-Israel relationship is a permanent fixture in the news headlines, but many are unaware that this rivalry has a long history, dating back to 480 BC. One of the biggest ever enemies of the Jewish people was a Persian villain named Haman. According to the Book of Esther, Haman, the royal vizier to King Xerxes, planned to kill all the Jews in the Persian Empire. But his plans were foiled by Mordechai and his niece Esther, who had risen to become Queen of Persia. The event is commemorated each year with elaborate festivals where people dress up in costume. Purim has 3 main traditions: the mutual exchange of gifts of food and drink, donating charity, and celebratory meal. But the main event, which takes place in every big city in Israel, is the traditional Purim parade, known as Adloyada, meaning until one no longer knows. The Adloyada parade takes back to the early days of Tel Aviv in 1912, then a major event that brought all the Jews together. The parade resumed after the State of Israel was established in 1948, and ever since, they have become a can't-miss event on the Israeli calendar, with hundreds of thousands participating throughout the country. There is a lesson to be learned regarding the current Iranian battle. Perhaps someday, it too will become history.
So, Ellie, we're going to speak about Queen Esther and feminism?
That's right, you believe it or not, but this Cinderella-like story teaches us a few lessons about feminism. So in the Book of Esther, we have 2 main feminine characters, of course, Esther and Queen Vashti, which are both, each in her own way, portrays this image of women's power. Vashti is the more stronger type. She's super smart yet stubborn, and she refuses to have her appearances before the king solely by his own desires, thing that she is paying a high price on losing her crown. And by contrast, we have Esther. She's the perfect foil to Vashti. She's submissive, she's passive at first, but then in this moment of faith, Lucy, she discovers her inner Vashti and stands up in front of 2 authorities, power in front of her uncle and the king. So it's 2 versions of feminism we can learn a thing or two about.
Let's see what the Israelis think about it.
Absolutely.
What's your costume?
A fairy.
A pirate.
A regular pirate, a fighter.
Can't you tell? I'm an Indian.
We have a little pilot, Harel Bar. Isn't that a pilot's name? I'm dressed as a hippie, and Ro'i is a pirate, and she is...
I'm a Japanese Hello Kitty, and we have another Japanese here.
Shrek v'Fiona! Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
I hope everyone lives together in peace, with no more war, and everything will be perfect.
Perfect. My name is Rafael Elfasi, and here I am. I am perfect.
Can I ask you a question? If you were a fruit, which kind of fruit would you be?
Happy holiday!
Hello. What's your costume?
What does it say? Yes, modern feminist. What does it say about me that I used to dress up like Queen Esther all the time?
You're a very strong feminist, Lucy.
Elio Gomberg, thank you very much for
Thank you.
this.
Happy holiday.
We're going out for a small break and then we're back. The Israeli-Palestinian peace process enters a critical stage, and the mistrust between the two sides grows as Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas gets set to meet the U.S. President in the White House tomorrow. In breaking news, exit polls in Crimea shows 93% support upon union with Russia. The plot thickens in the mystery surrounding flight MH370. More than 25 countries are involved in the vast search as the likelihood it was an act of terror increases. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted on recognition of Israel as a Jewish state in negotiations, while U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has called pressing the issue a mistake. Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is expected to reject the Israeli demand in a meeting at the White House on Monday. And joining me right now is I-24 News editor Nolit Zonker. Good evening. Lucy. Good evening. So, what was the question that we asked our viewers
today? The question was, we asked, do you think it's crucial that Palestinians recognize Israel as a Jewish state? Another intense question around the never-ending issues of the Middle East peace process. We had a pretty clear result in the I-24 News poll that I have to say is kind of heavily swayed to one side, with 83% saying yes, that it is crucial, and just 16% saying no.
It's not crucial.
Right.
Which is, I have to say that it's surprising. You know,
it is, and I have to say overall, I think we got more responses today that tended to that side, which even here in Israel is somewhat rare. I think the demand for a Jewish state is not unified within Israel. So let's go ahead and take a look. I actually think that one of our first comments was one of the most kind of to the point and accurate in a way. Shlomo Roth says, eventually, yes, but negotiations begin where the opposing sides begin, and then they move towards each other. It's a sign that one side does not take the peace process seriously enough, that they demand that the final demands be met before the process itself begins, essentially, he says. So there's a good point here that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it a very big point, and this has kind of created the latest spat between Israel and the U.S. now, but
you know, but many people are asking, maybe the Israeli Prime Minister just put it as another obstacle to the Palestinians.
Absolutely. It's being written here a lot. Haaretz newspaper, perhaps more left side, had an article today saying very clearly it's just a way to torpedo the peace talks, and yeah, that's definitely being heard here.
Let's hear more.
Maybe you shouldn't ask for your, maybe in a final solution. Maybe it shouldn't be your opening position.
Yes.
So Carl Ernest Roll says, why is this point so important? Because it would finally demonstrate that the Arabs accept the partition of the two-state solution. Contrary to what is believed widely, it's actually the Arabs that negate this basic approach to this conflict. He goes on to say, you want a two-state solution, you have to accept a Jewish state and an Arab state. And this echoes what we hear a lot.
You know, we heard even the economy and finance minister, Yair Lapid, saying in an interview that he gave to us, that he said that I don't need other people to recognize me as a Jewish state. I don't need to demand this because I know what I am, I know who I am, and I don't need this recognition from somebody else. And we are seeing that actually the people are thinking differently.
A lot of people did echo that also, though, and in a way it also supports what Kerry said over the weekend, where he kind of angered Israel, but he's saying, look, it's already in international law. Why do you need it now? You need everybody to announce it.
So let's ask our analyst for tonight. Joining us now is from Gaza is Adnan Abu Hassan, journalist in Gaza. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Adnan, is this a demand the Palestinians will ever agree to?
I do not know. What are you talking about? What is the subject, actually? I did not hear.
I'm talking about the recognition of an Israeli state, the recognition of a Jewish state. Is this a demand that the Palestinians will ever agree to?
Yes, I think that there is a kind of agreement on all the Palestinian sectors here in the Gaza Strip Arab and West Bank, that they will follow what President Abbas is saying all the time, that they will not recognize Israel as a Jewish state. Some of them said that this thing had been happened in 1948. And they have been hearing also what the Secretary of State Kerry is saying also all the time, that thing happened. But at the time being, that I think that all the factions and all the ordinary people, they are following what President Abbas
Yes,
said.
Mr. Adnan Abu Hassan, thank you very much for this. So here, I didn't know if he just when he said, "I don't understand what you're talking
It could mean
about."
two things.
It could
Either
be
he
in two
didn't
ways.
hear or
Yes, I don't
or he
know.
didn't get the question.
Which Jewish state are you talking about,
Exactly,
actually?
which is also a common approach. Let's go to A. Karim from Tulkarm, who said, no, Abbas can't promise something to Israel that could take away Palestinian rights in the future. Palestinians will never give this to Israel. And I think that maybe part of the reference here is part of the concerns about declaring it a Jewish state is connected with the refugee issue in the future, the right of return, the fear that if Palestinians do officially recognize it as a Jewish state publicly and so on, that could harm any chances for a right of return.
Yeah, the thing that we are asking is if it's already a well-known fact, if this is the reality, what's the problem?
What is the problem?
So let's move on.
Benjamin Netanyahu keeps asking this as well recently. He doesn't seem to have the answer yet. Actually, what I want to go to with Vanessa Koryat, who says something that's interesting with inside Israel. Jewish, according to whom? The rabbinate, the U.S. Jewry, the Russian Jews, who, what, how? And for those who aren't familiar with this is a very good reflection of what is going on in Israel, which is Israel is not clear within itself what the Jewish state means. Is it a nationality? Is it a religion?
Is it a religious state? It's not a religious state. Let's not even start talking about the inside dispute
It's inside
in the Israeli
Israel
society,
for
which is a big whole mess.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's just jump then real quick to AF in Cairo, who says Jewish or not Jewish, without ending the occupation, there will be no peace. And Mark Finkelstein kind of has a balanced response to that, saying the conflict is Palestinian rejectionism at its core, calling out to kind of what AF said in Cairo. A win-win solution to the conflict requires explicit mutual acceptance of nation statehood.
So we are seeing that, like you said, everybody understand the meaning of a Jewish country. Everybody knows that it already exists, so why should it be an obstacle to peace process, if not an excuse? One more thing before we're finishing?
Let's end quickly on Nathan Lyons, who says Jewish is a spurious category. They can recognize some borders in the existence of a state, but to recognize a Jewish state seems unnecessary. So again, we have borders. The country exists. Why now? Why press it in general? But maybe we'll see tomorrow.
It seems like, a Shakespearean line, to be or not to be. Yes. That is the question. Read Zanger, tomorrow you'll be here with another question. Thank you very much for this, and we're going out for a small break, 2 minutes break, and we will be back. The Israeli-Palestinian peace process enters a critical stage, and the mistrust between the two sides grows as Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas gets set to meet the U.S. President in the White House tomorrow. Breaking news, exit polls in Crimea shows 93% support of a union with Russia. The plot thickens in the mystery surrounding flight MH370. More than 25 countries are involved in the vast search as the likelihood it was an act of terror increases. Following the official confirmation that the Malaysia airline plane was suspected to have been deliberately diverted, police began searching the home of the pilots amidst the ongoing investigation of the world's current greatest aviation drama. I-24 News correspondent Shahal Peled explains what is known and what remains a mystery.
Where is the plane? This is the question that has been fascinating the world over the past week. Here's what is known thus far. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 left Kuala Lumpur a week ago on Saturday. An hour after takeoff, the communications and tracking systems were switched off, resulting in an official statement that the aircraft was in fact hijacked.
These movements are consistent with deliberate action by someone on the plane.
The flight was then unexpectedly turned around towards the Andaman Sea and still had 8 hours worth of fuel at the time a satellite picked up its last confirmed signal, 7 hours and 31 minutes after takeoff, igniting speculation that the plane might be on land anywhere in a number of countries covering thousands of square kilometers from Kazakhstan to Indonesia.
We are now looking at large tracts of land, crossing 11 countries as well as deep and remote oceans.
Meanwhile, suspicion surrounds the pilots of the missing plane. A replica flight simulator was found at the home of the senior pilot, Zahari Ahmad Shah, and police have been examining it. The home of 27-year-old co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid, who reportedly used to invite passengers into the cockpit, was inspected as well.
Deliberate action would mean that the aircraft was manipulated in such a way that is consistent with a pilot or anybody with familiarity with the aircraft control system.
So far, the 25 countries cooperating in the investigation haven't unveiled any militant links or psychological problems of the crew or passengers, including the 2 Iranian nationals who flew with stolen passports that could explain a motive for sabotaging the flight. Despite reports of debris being spotted in the sea, nothing has yet been found that can be linked to the plane or its 239 passengers. Several search teams have already concluded their final search missions, but the hunt for the vanishing 300,000-kilo airliner continues.
And joining me right now is Brigadier General in the reserves, Mena Bacharach, and an expert on aviation security. Thank you very much for coming to the studio.
Thank you, Lucy.
So why did it take so many days to come to the conclusion that it was actually maybe a terror attack, or maybe?
First of all, there is no clue where is the aircraft. There is only some kind of suspicions on some kind of signaling worldwide from some sources. So mainly I would say that there are 2 options right now. One, that there was a terrorist attack that failed, and second, that somebody from the cockpit, like an incident that occurred in 1999 with the Egyptian Airlines from the flight from the US to Cairo, that the co-pilot died their aircraft in the ocean, and 270 lives lost. So this is, I would say, this is much more realistic right now. If there was a terrorist attack like the shoe bomber in 2001, the Richard Reed, then again, why nobody is claiming responsibility? Terrorist act is usually done with some kind of benefit that you try to achieve. In this case, there is completely silent.
Mena, they didn't do any, like, outside. We know that Israel has always background checks, checkups on its pilots, on their pilots, on every person who's that is on crew and in the crew. It doesn't happen outside?
It depends on the country and the regulation. If you're talking about the US and Europe, there are some kind of regulation either under the ICAO or the IATA. But if you're talking about Africa, the East, Far East, it's not necessarily that they will go through the same procedures and requirements. So, but basically in each airline, and especially if it's a national one like Malaysian Airlines, there is some background check, and the pilots and the co-pilots known to the company, definitely.
They're known to the company, so in a case that something like this, like we're seeing, is happening, is the company doing, let's say, reorganization after something like that?
I'm sure that when the result will come out from these incidents, and when hopefully they will reveal some of the unknown facts that it's now a secret for everybody, yes. Definitely there will be some kind of checking and investigation in order to improve the system.
Yes, Mena Bacharach, thank you very much for this.
You're most welcome.
Meir Hatzion, one of Israel's most celebrated combat soldiers, passed away on Friday at the age of 80 and was laid to rest earlier today in the presence of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other officials, Israeli officials. I-24 News correspondent Elio Chomberg and Roni Ben Bassat on the mythical commando Unit 101 and the man considered a legend.
Meir Hatzion, one of the most appreciated figures in the history of the Israeli military, passed away Friday at the age of 80. Hatzion's bravery throughout his military service earned him a Medal of Courage and a reputation as one of the best commanders Israel's military ranks have ever known. In his early military career, Hatzion was involved in the establishment of the elite IDF retaliation squad Unit 101, together with former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. At the time, cross-border raids by Arab Fedayeen resulted in the deaths of many civilians and frustrated the IDF. Unit 101 was designed to implement a new doctrine that called for quick and deadly retaliations in response to the attacks, targeting the villages the Fedayeen originated from, usually not distinguishing the civilian from the military. In October 14, 1953, several months after the founding of the Special Forces Unit, Hatzion took part in the unit's operation in the village of Kibia in Samaria that resulted in the deaths of 70 Arabs. The unit was disbanded in January 54 because of the controversial incident which some described as a massacre. At only 21, at the recommendation of then Chief of Staff Moshe Dayan, Hatzion became the youngest captain in the IDF. After the unit was dissolved, Hatzion and its other members were merged with the paratrooper brigades. After all these years, Hatzion is still the benchmark by which all elite soldiers are judged. There was no one braver than he was, said President Shimon Peres. He was a legend already in his own time, and if not in his own eyes, then in the eyes of all those who knew his bravery.
And for a look at the week in headline is I-24 News media correspondent Anthony Grant. Hello, Anthony. How are you?
Hi, nice to see you. Good evening.
So you have a very enormous look this week, I have to say.
Yeah, well.
Definitely. A lot of things that I missed.
Well, here's something that I thought people had missed, but fortunately people are picking up on it. The Express talks about, from the UK, the children of conflict, the innocent victims of the civil war in Syria. Big UNICEF report is out saying that since last March, the number of displaced children inside Syria has tripled from 920,000 to 3 million.
Yeah, and we just heard today that Assad regime may declare a victory on what is happening in Syria. So
yeah, fast-moving events there, but the children, of course, the pictures are just awful to look at of the suffering, and the press is picking up on it very much so right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems that for the rest of the world, it's just footage and pictures.
Yeah, but each story is personal. And speaking of major news and a little bit off the radar, the New York Times has this headline, "Foes of America in Russia crave rupture in ties." Now,
explain.
Basically, what the article is saying, that there are members of Putin's inner circle that have allegiance to a certain way of thinking which favors a distancing of Russia from American and Western interests, Western banking, Western culture, and they're loving what's happening in Crimea and might be actually working overtime to keep these superpowers as far apart as possible.
And I have to say that they're absolutely going to love the polls tonight.
I'm sure, are going to be looking at those polls with a distinctly pro-Russian perspective, obviously. But the fact that it goes to the old Cold War mentality, and it looks like it's upon us in a new way. And so all the
never ends. It's
never
amazing.
ends, and the analytical reporting is just starting to.
Just seems like a Mission Impossible film, another chapter in a Mission Impossible film.
And we'll all see how Obama reacts.
Yes.
To what happens. Speaking of American politics, The Telegraph from the UK has this headline: Hillary Clinton, going back in time a little bit, warned over quote-unquote nasty palace politics at Diana funeral. Well, some new documents have been leaked, not by Edward Snowden.
When I saw this headline, I said, wow, am I reading about the real Diana funeral?
Yeah. Back in the day, back in 1997 in September, apparently Hillary Clinton was warned by members of the U.S. State Department to tread very lightly in response to questions from the press about the funeral because of a lot of very angry politics going on at Buckingham Palace. You know, and in the United States, we were all just very fascinated and, well, upset and by the tragedy, and that was the only thing we thought about. But in the UK, of course, there was a lot of palace intrigue, and the U.S. Department of State was saying, Clinton, don't get involved. Just back off the questions. Off. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
a lot of politics for people who wondered. There is politics in Buckingham Palace. It's just not just a beautiful palace.
yeah, it's a real life palace with real life machinations.
And you have one
Toronto
more?
star, politics in Toronto. Rob Ford, the mayor who unapologetically smoked crack, has now as a contender looking to fill his shoes. Olivia Chow is a Hong Kong-born mayoral candidate who was hit out at Rob Ford in her first campaign speech, saying that he's not a good role model for her kids. Well, I can't argue with her on that.
Anthony Grant,
Yeah.
I could have finished this corner better than this statement. Thank you very much
Pleasure.
for this. Jamal al-Mahma, or Camel of Burdens, is an iconic Palestinian painting believed to have been destroyed years ago. Today, a remake of the original is being presented in a Dubai exhibition. I24 News reporter Roni Ben Bassat takes a look.
This painting of a porter struggling to balance Jerusalem over his back has become a symbol of the Palestinian struggle for a state. Originally painted in 1973 by Palestinian artist Liman Mansour, it was sold to then Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi.
Gaddafi bought it from me in the 70s. After that, the painting disappeared. I tried to follow it during Gaddafi's time via the Libyan ambassador in London and Jordan, but to no effect, so we thought the painting was destroyed.
The original artwork is believed to have been destroyed during a 1986 U.S. airstrike on Tripoli. Now, 28 years later, Mansour decided to recreate a larger version of the painting, unveiling it in an exhibition in Dubai.
It's a very expressive picture, and it tells the story of Palestinian responsibility, and of course, it's a beautiful picture of the Palestinian and Arab reality.
Although the original piece fell off the radar years ago, a copy of it has found its way into many Palestinian homes as an icon of their fight for statehood and love for Jerusalem.
It's a symbol.
It's become a symbol of the Palestinian situation and what's happening in Palestine. And artistically too, it's like an icon, like Che Guevara's picture. Everyone knows it.
I was not thinking of making an icon of it when I painted it, but now, with so much Arab and Palestinian focus on this painting, of course it has become even more famous than me in the Arab world. I'm identified by it.
The painting is due to be auctioned by the end of this week, and some of the proceeds will be used to support an art initiative for future generations of Palestinian artists.
And with me now to look at economy is financial analyst Leonard Friedfeld. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
So everybody's talking about China being a superpower, super economic power, but there is a but.
There is a but, and the but is called debt. Debt, very simple, on Chinese banks' balance sheet. From 2008, it increased by $15,000 billion.
Wow.
It's a huge number. Today, it's totaling $24,000 billion.
So 15, again, say the number?
$15,000 billion.
$15,000 billion. How do you start to even
to count? It's exactly,
count?
It's another figure which is simpler to understand. It's Chinese total debt today represents 2.5 times the GDP of China, which is huge number. Not only is like for private companies, and let's take the Chinese company this year in 2014, they will pay 1,000 billion on serving the debt, paying interest on the debt, which is twice as much as the U.S. Treasury is paying each year.
How do you get out of a crisis?
This is exactly
this amount.
This is exactly the good question to ask, and you also have to add the public debt, because public debt for the past 2 years went up by 70%, reaching 3,000 billion US dollar. And how do you get out from this? The Chinese government is doing what the US government didn't do in the US with Lehman Brothers. You know, with Lehman Brothers, they let it go. They say it will give a lesson to the market, and did not understand that it was too big to fail, that it was a systemic risk on the entire finance in Europe, in Asia, in the world. Chinese, what they're doing now, one company doing solar panel went bankrupt, only for $10 million. Usually the Chinese in the past, they were like putting money to avoid Chapter 11. This time they let the company went through Chapter 11 and to give a strong signal to the CEO, to the owner, to say, you're a stakeholder, you have to be responsible, you have to manage the risk.
Lionel, how is it going to affect the status, like the world status of China?
In a sense, is you need some debt to fuel the growth, okay? But it's impossible to have too much debt, otherwise we'll have, investors won't have confidence anymore into your market. So now they're starting to do cleanup in China, and at the end of the day, the government, is owning all the banks and is controlling everything. But now the Chinese government is introducing capital market rules into China to teach actually CEOs and other corporates how to behave properly into a capital market.
You know, you talked about the investors and maybe not investing anymore in China. We know that there are a lot of Israelis who are investing in China and in the economy in China. Is it starting to actually affect Israelis maybe to step back?
Not sure, because I think a big cleanup will take place. Company will merge. They will, a bank are going to consolidate. So they're going to take a really strong step. They don't want the economy to went down. And the Chinese are very smart, because just yesterday the Central Bank of China just announced on the RMB, the yuan, the Chinese currency, that they're going to the currency is given, the price is given every day by the central bank, but they're going to have a band, the flotation of the band plus or minus 2%, and the price of the yuan will float with a bid and ask like the euro, like the dollars, and we'll see in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, US dollar, euro, and RMB are going to be like free currency in the world, because they have to adapt to the capital markets.
Very interesting. Lionel, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now to Myanmar rockers. The Side Effect band played the gig of their dreams in America, becoming the first band from their isolated nation to play in the Austin Music Festival.
From isolation into the limelight. 2 years ago, this Myanmar rock band fell victim to their country's then pariah status when their attempts to raise money for their album fell foul of US sanctions. Now they're heading to America to be the first band from Myanmar to play one of the world's biggest festivals, following their dreams with the help of donations from fans around the world.
It's been very difficult for us to be able to go to the South and Southwest Music Festival because, first of all, the money is the major problem because we don't have any money. But we were raising money on a crowdfunding campaign called Pledge Music, but we only got like 50%.
Side Effect had to grapple with everything from censored lyrics to tight restrictions on live gigs under Myanmar's former junta. They have long struggled with funding, and their drummer Zaire too practices at home on piles of books because he can't afford a kit. But the festival in Austin, Texas is a revelation.
It's so much love in the air. The people, I think because of the music, all the people are here because they love music. Whenever I tell someone that, oh, we are a band from Burma, they're like, oh, really? They're really interested.
The band get a packed house to play to.
We never thought we would be playing a Southern Southwest one day. This is incredible.
A few of Austin's Myanmar expats have even come to cheer them on.
Just simple, very happy, just very emotionally happy.
Competing for music industry attention against some of the most dynamic new bands around, this is their best shot to show the world what they can do.
And joining me is the host of I-24 News Sports Magazine, Jonathan Regev.
Yes,
Hello.
he's here.
Good evening.
Evening.
So good to see you.
Good to see you, Lucy.
And you are coming with breaking news.
Yes, Last hour news. Leo Messi scored 3 goals against Osasuna. That's a game that ended about a half hour ago.
Come on, this is breaking news?
No, but what is breaking news is that he has now 371 goals as a Barcelona player. No one ever scored more goals for Barcelona than Leo Messi. And he's less than 27 years old.
I'm going to tell you something. This is now breaking news.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Because, this is Messi. Come on.
Oh, so let's just, score.
It's just,
score again. Yeah, win another Champions League.
Another goal, another,
Yeah, tell me when something new happens.
Give me something new.
We will begin with the Formula One race that took place this morning in Australia. Nico Rosberg won it. We'll give him the honors, but the big news do not come from the winner, but from the men who didn't even finish across the finish line. Sebastian Vettel, so many times we've spoken about him last season. He won every possible race in 2013, but something has happened during the break. He only finished 5 laps in Melbourne, and his car experienced technical problems. His car also experienced a lot of problems during the warm-up the last few weeks. And he was the Red Bull team was troubled. There was trouble in his car. He completed 5 laps. He said the car was just not going. Something was wrong with the engine, with the motor. Something was not going. He only completed 5 laps, and he's out. He won 9 consecutive races at the end of 2013.
Somebody's going to be fired, I think.
I'm not surprised if it already did.
And we're moving to tennis.
Yes, so many surprises at Indian Wells. Rafa Nadal, Berdy, Tsonga, so many top seeds go out. But at the end, the final, not surprising at all. It's going to be Novak Djokovic against Roger Federer. Djokovic, in my eyes, the best player in the world today. Yes, he's only the world number 2, but as far as I see it, he is the best right now. Against Roger Federer, who many people, like myself, said last year, well, maybe his career should be over. He's proving us all wrong. He made it to the Australian Open semi-finals. He won in Qatar. He beat Djokovic in Qatar. He's going to run him again at the final in Wells.
You have 30 seconds. Okay?
Bayern Munich. It's as early as mid-March, the Ides of March, and Bayern Munich can secure the German championship next week. It may happen. No team ever won the German championship so early. Bayern Munich can do it next week. I will not be surprised if it happens. If not next week, the week after that. They're just superb.
Jonathan Regev.
That's not breaking news either.
Next time, come with breaking news when I score a lot of goals, which I'm not. Jonathan Regev, thank you very much.
When will I have breaking news? Come on, Lucy.
We're going out for a small break. Don't go anywhere.